Let's take a look at the sheep brain. As you can see, the sheep brain consists of a large portion called the cerebrum right here. And you can see the gyri and sulci, the little bumps and grooves of the brain. And this allows for electrical impulses. And we actually have a thin tissue or membrane around the brain that protects it. And you can see these little indentations here. And you also have, of course, the brain case, which is the cranium that protects it, because you can see how soft and squishy and very delicate the brain is. Now, the cerebrum consists of two parts, a left and right hemisphere. I actually separated one of the hemispheres. I cut this in half so we could actually see the cerebellum. So one of the hemispheres is removed. This is only one hemisphere. This is only the left hemisphere. And what I did here was cut it in half so that you could see the inside of the cerebellum. Now, this is the outside of the cerebellum. The cerebellum is the posterior and more ventral part of the brain. And you can actually see the brain stem here, and then that leads to the spinal cord. Now, before we leave the cerebrum, there are different parts of the cerebrum controlling motor function, as well as sight, hearing, and olfactory response or smell. If I flip this over, you can see the inside here, and you can actually see the cerebellum, which is cut in half, and you can see this design. This design looks like a tree, and from Latin it's called the arbor vitae, the tree of life. Vitae meaning life, arbor referring to tree. And right here you can actually see the bundle of nerves that connected the cerebrum, one hemisphere to the other. Now down here we have, in this region, we will have the medulla oblongata. And the medulla oblongata, this region here, controls respiration, which is breathing, circulatory system, heart function, digestion. It controls sneezing and swallowing. And if we come right here, you can actually see this region here would be the thalamus, and this actually controls pain, pain perception. And below that, we actually have the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus, hypo meaning below or under, and the hypothalamus actually controls regulating temperature as well as releasing hormones. Now, some other parts of the brainstem or midbrain include the pons and pituitary gland. Maybe you've heard of the pituitary gland before. And the pituitary gland is actually called the master gland, as it secretes many hormones in controlling body function. The heart has two atria, and then down here it has two ventricles. You can see some of the heart strings. The bulk of the heart is muscle. This is cardiac muscle. This is different muscle than what our muscles covering our body would be. The muscles covering our body are called skeletal muscles. This muscle, however, if it's damaged from a heart attack, cannot be replaced. It will actually form scar tissue and will be very difficult to continue pumping of the blood. But this heart is a very strong muscle. As I said, it's very important and vital in pumping blood. So you can see there's a covering. You can see there's also a lot of fat here. Pericardium is refers to the covering of the heart. Cardio or cardiac referring to heart. And you can actually see here, this is a separation, this midpoint separation. This is called a septa or septum. Remember, we learned septa or septum means separation. So this septum separates between the left and right atrium ventricles. So you can see, okay, the chambers in here. In a human heart, okay, a mammal heart will have 4 chambers, 2 atria and 2 ventricles. So you can see the valve strings here that open and close, and you can see the blood vessels in the major aorta right here, okay, in which blood will leave the heart. Now the blood will enter the right atrium from the superior and inferior vena cavas, which are the large veins going to the heart. And these large veins, especially the inferior vena cava, rises from the lower body up to the heart. Now, when it reaches the right atrium, it's going to go through the tricuspid valve and then to the right ventricle. And as it moves from the right ventricle, it's going to leave the pulmonary semilunar valve. Now, the focus here is pulmonary. Pulmonary refers to lungs. So that means it's going to be leaving the right ventricle to go to the lungs. Then when it comes back from the lungs, it's going to be oxygenated blood. So the vena cavas are going to carry deoxygenated blood, or blood that has a lot of carbon dioxide. It's going to pump through the right atrium and then right ventricle, go to the lungs and get oxygen. Then it's going to travel from the lungs, which have the oxygen, and it's now going to enter the heart. And this oxygenated blood is going to go through the pulmonary veins, and then it's going to come into the left atrium and then down through the bicuspid valve to the left ventricle. And it's going to actually leave the heart through an artery, and that major artery is called the aorta. Now, an artery is going to be moving away from the heart, while a vein is going to go to the heart. So A for away. And as that blood is pumped away from the heart through the artery, it's going to go throughout the body, carrying oxygenated blood to the cells. This is a cow eye, and you can actually see the cornea of the eye. And we're going to remove the cornea. You can see that leathery structure here, and you can see the white of the eye, and we can see a lot of the muscle here as the muscle allows the eye to turn left and right. Okay, now there's not just muscle on the outside, but there's muscle on the inside, and that would be the iris. Now, the cornea is very thick, protects the eye, and basically protects it from UV light. So we're going to actually trim around this and cut the cornea. So let's go ahead and do that now. And if we get a very thin liquid that comes out, that's going to be called the aqueous humor. Okay, you can actually see some of it coming out. That aqueous humor is very dark liquid, so I'm removing the cornea. And you can see how thin that cornea is compared to the rest of the eye. So let's remove that. So I removed the cornea, and I'm going to reach in here and I'm going to pull out, oh, there we go. Here we have the lens. You can see the lens. It's a lot larger than the fish and the frog. It is hard. Oh, it just rolled away on me. It is hard and it will bounce. Okay, let's try that again. It's biconvex, meaning it bulges out on the sides. And let's place, now if I squeeze this a little bit, a jelly-like structure called the vitreous humor will come out. And this gives the eye its shape. So you can see that. That gives the eye its shape. So this is actually the bulk of the eye, while the thin watery liquid that came out first was actually between the cornea and the lens. So this is the bulk of the eye. That's actually behind the lens. Now I'm going to remove this part of the eye, and this is actually the iris. And I don't know if you can see, but this is a muscle that will contract. There's many different little lines on it. Now this muscle actually makes the color of her eye. Okay, so it can be blue And I broke off a piece, so I only have a piece of the circle. I have about a third of it. And so that's the iris. Now I'm going to go ahead and flip the eye inside out, and you can actually see this really beautiful blue pattern and shape, and that's actually the inside of the eye. That's actually called the retina. Okay, it's very dark and it has a oily kind of color. Now you do have this one little structure here that's kind of in the middle there. That's actually part of the optic nerve that connects to the brain. And the rods and cones allow you to see black and white. That's the rods. And the cones, C for cone, C for color. I went ahead and cut a bottle in half. I also used a rubber glove, and I just cut that rubber glove into a couple pieces, and what I did was I cut off one finger, placed it up here in the opening of the bottle, and the other part at the bottom. And you can do this with 2 balloons. If you want to be a little more detailed, you can use some straws and actually make 2 balloons. I just used one finger representing the lungs. And what's going to happen is it creates a pressure inside that will actually cause, when I pull down on this to inflate. When I push up, it will deflate. Inflate, deflate, inflate, deflate. When I pull down on the diaphragm, it breathes in, it inflates. When I push up on the diaphragm, it deflates or exhales.